Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
The first sign that something had gone very, very wrong was the silence. Space wasn't supposed to be silent. Not like this. On a functioning ship, there was always noise. The soft hum of engines, the rhythmic pulse of life support, the occasional creak of stressed metal reminding you that you were flying a fragile bubble through an endless vacuum that wanted you dead. But now, nothing. Daniel Hayes floated in the pilot's chair, one hand gripping the console, the other hovering uselessly over a cluster of dead controls. Every system around him had gone dark, except for a single flickering panel that stubbornly displayed one message: navigation error, unknown region. Great, he muttered. Fantastic. Love that for me. He pushed himself out of the chair and drifted toward the viewport. Stars, thousands of them, stretched across the void in patterns he didn't recognize. No familiar constellations, no known markers, no traffic lanes, nothing, which meant one thing: I am so lost. The ship gave a sudden, violent jolt. Daniel slammed into the wall with a grunt. Warning lights flared red for half a second before dying again. What now? A second impact followed, this one more controlled, almost like docking. But that was impossible. He hadn't sent a distress signal. He hadn't even had time to panic properly yet. Before he could process it, the emergency hatch behind him hissed open. Daniel froze. Cold air flooded the cabin. Not the sterile, recycled kind he was used to, but something sharper, cleaner, alien. Footsteps echoed from the corridor beyond. Not boots. Not quite. He turned slowly, and immediately wished he hadn't. The figure standing in the doorway was not human. She was tall, easily a head taller than him even in the low gravity, and built like someone who had never once skipped training in her life. Sleek armor covered her body, dark and segmented, faintly glowing lines tracing along the edges like living circuitry. In one hand, she held a weapon that looked like it could dismantle a small building. In the other, nothing, which was somehow more intimidating. Her skin had a faint iridescent quality, like it reflected light in subtle, shifting tones. And her eyes glowed, not brightly, not blindingly, but enough that he couldn't look away. A deep, luminous violet, sharp and focused, locking onto him with terrifying precision. She stepped forward. Each movement was controlled, efficient, predatory. Daniel raised his hand slowly. Okay, he said. Before anything happens, I just want to say, I come in peace. I'm definitely not armed, and this is all a huge misunderstanding. She didn't respond. She just kept walking. Also, he added, because apparently his brain had decided this was a time for over-explaining. If this is, like, restricted space or something, I swear I didn't mean to... She moved. Fast. One moment she was 3 meters away. The next, she had him pinned against the wall. Daniel barely had time to register the impact before her forearm pressed across his chest, holding him in place with effortless strength. The metal behind him groaned slightly under force. Her weapon was angled just enough that he could see the faint energy build up along its core. Close enough. Way too close. Identify yourself human, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, layered almost, like there were harmonics beneath the main tone that his ears struggled to process. Daniel swallowed. Daniel, he said quickly. Daniel Hayes, civilian engineer. Emphasis on civilian. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You are not registered within Zyron space. Yeah, he said. That tracks, because I have absolutely no idea where I am. Her grip tightened. Not painfully, but enough to remind him that she could crush him if she wanted to. You entered restricted territory without authorization. I entered somewhere without authorization, he corrected. I don't even know what Zyron is. A pause. Her gaze shifted, studying his face more closely now, not just assessing, analyzing. Daniel felt like he was being scanned down to the atomic level. This vessel, she said slowly, is not equipped for long-range travel of this magnitude. Correct, he said. It also wasn't equipped to get completely lost, but here we are. Another pause. Something flickered in her expression, subtle, but there. Confusion? Curiosity? He wasn't sure, but it was enough to make his survival instincts loosen their grip just a little, which, unfortunately, was all his brain needed to betray him, because now that he wasn't entirely focused on not dying, something else pushed to the surface, a detail he hadn't fully processed before. Her eyes. Up close, they were different, not just glowing, layered. There were patterns in them, faint, shifting rings of light that moved almost like galaxies, slow and hypnotic. It wasn't just intimidating. It was... His mouth opened, and without consulting any higher authority whatsoever, he said, "Your eyes are kinda cute." Silence. Immediate. Absolute. Daniel's brain caught up with his mouth approximately 1 second too late. "Oh," he said softly. "Oh, that was a mistake." The alien warrior froze. Not in a threatening way. Not in a preparing to strike way. Just froze. Her grip didn't tighten. Didn't loosen. She just stopped, and then, very slowly, color began to rise beneath her skin. At first, Daniel thought it was some kind of warning response, a biological signal before an attack. But it didn't spread like aggression. It spread like heat, starting at her cheeks, then moving outward, a deep crimson hue blooming across her face. Her eyes widened, just slightly. "What?" she said, quieter now. "Did you say?" Daniel closed his eyes briefly. There were moments in life where you could recover from a mistake. This did not feel like one of them. "I said," he began carefully, "that your eyes are kind of cute." The color deepened. Noticeably, her hand dropped away from his chest, as if she just realized she was touching him. She took a step back. Then another. "You..." She stopped, turning her face slightly away. "You used that term." Daniel blinked. "Yeah." Her shoulders stiffened. The red spread further. Down her neck now, faintly visible where armor didn't fully cover. "That term," she repeated, as if trying to process it, "is not casually applied." "Okay," Daniel said slowly. "Good to know. Wish I'd known that about 5 seconds ago." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stood there visibly recalibrating, which was surreal, because 5 seconds ago she had been one step away from vaporizing him. Now she looked flustered. Daniel stared. "Did I break you?" Her head snapped back toward him. "I am not broken," she said sharply. "Okay, good. Because I'd really prefer not to be the guy who accidentally breaks first contact." She hesitated again. Then more quietly, "In Zyran culture, such a statement carries implication." Daniel felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. "What kind of implication?" he asked, already dreading the answer. She met his gaze. Still red. Still very, very red. For a long, uncomfortable moment, neither of them moved. Daniel stood there with his back against the wall, hands still half raised, as if his body hadn't yet received the update that he was no longer in immediate danger of being vaporized. The alien warrior, Threxay, he would later learn, stood a few steps away, rigid and visibly overwhelmed, which was not a word he ever expected to associate with someone who had pinned him like a decorative wall ornament less than a minute ago. A personal one, she had said, and that had been it. No elaboration, no helpful clarification, just that ominous, lingering statement hanging in the air between them. Daniel cleared his throat. "Okay," he said carefully, "we're clearly having a cultural miscommunication here." She didn't look at him. "That is evident." "Right. So maybe we just talk it out? Define terms? Establish that I am, in fact, an idiot and not trying to accidentally offend an entire alien civilization?" Her fingers twitched slightly at her side. "You have offended protocol." "Of course I have." Silence again. Daniel shifted his weight, tried to appear as non-threatening as possible, which, given that he was unarmed and she could probably bench press his entire ship, wasn't particularly difficult. "So," he continued, "help me out here. The word cute, what does it mean to you?" That got a reaction. She stiffened. "It is not a word used lightly." "I'm gathering that." "It is reserved," she said slowly, as if choosing each word with extreme care, "for individuals who evoke a destabilizing emotional response. Daniel blinked. Destabilizing? Yes. That sounds bad. It is not bad, she said quickly, then paused, as if surprised by her own urgency. Her gaze flicked away again. It is significant. Daniel rubbed his face. Okay, significant. Got it. That's still not great, but slightly less terrifying. She folded her arms tightly across her chest. In most contexts, it is used only when one is... She stopped. Daniel waited. When one is considering a bond. There it was, the word he had been dreading. He exhaled slowly. Define bond, he said, already bracing himself. She hesitated. Then, very flatly, a formal, exclusive interpersonal connection with long-term implications. Daniel stared at her. You mean like... Yes. Oh, no. Her expression hardened slightly, though the red tint on her skin hadn't faded at all. You used the term directly, without hesitation, with sustained eye contact. I was panicking, he said. That does not negate the action. It absolutely should. It does not. Daniel dragged a hand down his face again. Okay, let's rewind. In human language, cute is harmless. It's casual. It's low stakes. She frowned slightly. You apply it to those you wish to bond with. Sometimes, he admitted, but also to things like small animals, or aesthetically pleasing objects, or like a nice cup of coffee if it is foam art. Her entire posture went rigid. You compare me, she said slowly, to beverages? No, that came out wrong. And juvenile fauna. I said that earlier, yes, but I immediately regretted it. And decorative consumables. Okay, when you listen like that, it sounds insulting, but I swear it's not. She turned away sharply again, one hand rising to her face. This is highly irregular. I am extremely aware of that, Daniel said. You have made a declaration without understanding its weight. Yes. And now you attempt to redefine it. Yes. This is confusing. Daniel let out a short, helpless laugh. Welcome to my entire life. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she stood there in silence, shoulders tense, as if trying to process something far more complicated than a simple linguistic misunderstanding. After a moment, she spoke again, quieter this time. Why that word? Daniel blinked. What? Why choose that term? She said, still not looking at him. If it carries no intention? He hesitated. Because, honestly, that was a fair question. I didn't choose it, he said finally. It just came out. That is not how language functions. It is when you're about 2 seconds away from a panic-induced meltdown. She glanced at him briefly. Explain. Daniel gestured vaguely. Okay, so, brain under stress, survival instincts firing. You show up, look terrifying, pin me to a wall, my brain goes, say something non-threatening. She tilted her head slightly. And that was the result? Apparently. You attempted to reduce perceived hostility by initiating a bonding declaration. When you say it like that, it sounds strategic, he said. It was not strategic. She studied him for a long moment. You're either highly irrational, she said, or your species has deeply inconsistent communication patterns. Both, Daniel said immediately. Definitely both. Another pause. Then, very faintly, the tension in her shoulders eased. Not completely, but enough that Daniel noticed. If what you say is true, she said slowly, then your statement does not carry the intent it would among my people. Correct, he said quickly. No intent. Zero intent. Negative intent, even. She nodded once. Then you may retract it. Daniel exhaled in relief. Yes. Great. I retract it. Fully. Completely. Consider it unsaid. She turned back to face him. Clarify. He blinked. I just did. You retract the meaning, she said. But do you retract the observation? Daniel opened his mouth, paused, closed it, because now that he thought about it, that was a different question, and a much more dangerous one. Define observation, he said cautiously. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You stated that my eyes are cute. Was that statement false? Daniel hesitated, because the problem was, it wasn't. Her eyes were still glowing faintly in the dim light of the broken ship, still layered, still oddly mesmerizing. And now that he wasn't actively fearing for his life, he could actually appreciate the detail, which made this so much worse. I mean, he said slowly, objectively speaking. Truthfully, she corrected. He sighed. Truthfully, no, it wasn't false. The silence that followed was different this time. Heavier, more focused. The faint red color returned. Stronger now. Then you have not retracted the statement, she said. I retracted the implication, he argued. That is insufficient. It's the best I've got. She took a step closer, not aggressively, just closer. Her gaze locked onto his again, intense but no longer threatening. In Zyran terms, she said, a statement repeated or upheld after retraction carries greater weight. Daniel's stomach dropped. You're kidding. I am not. So, by not lying just now, I made it worse? Yes. He stared at her, then up at the ceiling, then back at her. I hate this. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied him again, that same analytical look from before, but softer now, less like a threat assessment, more like curiosity. You are difficult to categorize, she said. I've been told that. You initiate a declaration without intent, attempt to retract it, then reaffirm its truth. When you summarize it like that, it sounds like I know what I'm doing. Do you not? Absolutely not. Another pause, then quietly, then you are reckless. Daniel let out a small breath. I prefer unfortunate. Her lips pressed together. Just slightly. Both are plausible. And for the first time since she had boarded a ship, there was no immediate threat in the air. Just confusion, awkwardness, and a rapidly escalating situation that Daniel had absolutely no idea how to fix. The walk to her ship was tense. Not immediately life-threatening tense. Daniel was no longer being held at weapon point, but definitely the kind of tense where one wrong word could still end very badly for him. Threxay walked half a step ahead, posture straight, movements precise, like she was trying very hard to maintain control over something internal. Daniel followed, trying not to stare, trying and failing, not to notice that her skin still held a faint reddish hue. So, he said after about 30 seconds of silence that felt like 30 minutes, just to check, I'm not a prisoner, right? You are not restrained, she replied. That is not the same answer. You are under observation. That also sounds bad. It is procedural, she said. Is procedural usually this awkward? She didn't answer. That probably meant yes. The corridor outside his ship was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It wasn't built so much as grown. The walls curved organically, seamless and smooth, faint lines of bioluminescent light pulsing beneath the surface like veins. The air felt different too, cooler, richer, carrying a subtle metallic scent mixed with something almost floral. Daniel glanced around as they walked. Okay, I have to ask, this is a ship, right? Yes. It looks alive. It is partially biointegrated. Of course it is. He nodded to himself like that made perfect sense, because at this point, questioning things felt pointless. They reached a wide opening that led into what was clearly a central chamber. And that's when Daniel realized something important. They were not alone. Several other Zyrans turned as they entered. Each one was different. Variations in height, armor design, subtle shifts in skin tone, but they all shared the same presence. Controlled, powerful, dangerous. And now every single one of them was looking at him. Daniel gave a small, awkward wave. Hi, he said. No one waved back. Great. Threxay stepped forward. This is Commander Threxay, she said, her voice returning to that firm, authoritative tone from before. The human will be under my supervision. A taller Zyran, standing near the center of the room, tilted his head slightly. His armor was more elaborate than the others, marked with faint, glowing patterns that suggested rank. Supervision, he repeated. There was something in the way he said it. Not disbelief. Not exactly. But definitely interest. Threxay hesitated. It was brief, So brief Daniel almost missed it, but it was there. He has initiated a personal declaration. The room went completely still. If it had been quiet before, it was nothing compared to this. Every Zyron in the chamber shifted their focus, no longer just curious, but sharply attentive. Daniel groaned under his breath. Can we not phrase it like that? The taller Zyron stepped forward slightly. His gaze moved from Threxay to Daniel, assessing both of them in a way that felt far more deliberate than before. You initiated bonding protocol, he said slowly. With Zyron warrior? Daniel immediately shook his head. No, I used the wrong word under extreme stress, and now I'm suffering the consequences. That is not a recognized protocol exception, Threxay muttered. I didn't know your protocols. You spoke in your own language. Yes, exactly. That's my point. The commander's expression didn't change much, but there was a subtle shift around his eyes. Amusement. Daniel was almost certain of it. Fascinating, the commander said. First contact, and already a cultural entanglement. It's not an entanglement, Daniel insisted. It's a misunderstanding. Threxay crossed her arms, then retracted. I did. Inadequately. Daniel turned to her. I said I take it back. You retracted the implication, she corrected, not the statement. He looked back at the commander. See? This is what I'm dealing with. The commander folded his hands behind his back. Then clarify, he said. Daniel blinked. Why is everyone asking me to clarify things today? Because your initial statement lacks precision. That's because it was a panic sentence. That is not a formal classification. It should be. A faint ripple passed through the room. Not quite laughter, but close. Daniel sighed. Okay, fine. Clarification. Let's do this properly. He turned back to Threxay. You are not small, harmless, or, whatever else cute apparently implies in your culture, he said. You are extremely intimidating. You showed up, pinned me to a wall, and I was about 90% sure I was about to die. Several of the Zyrans nodded slightly. That at least seemed to align with expectations. Threxay's posture straightened just a fraction. Accurate, she said. Great, Daniel said. Glad we agree on that. He took a breath. And yet, he paused, because now every single person in the room was watching him, waiting, judging. This was a mistake. This was absolutely a mistake. But, well, he said, your eyes are still kind of cute. Silence. Again. But this time it was worse, because now it wasn't just Threxay reacting. It was all of them. A collective, sharp intake of breath echoed through the chamber. Daniel closed his eyes. Yep, he said softly. I heard it that time. That was bad. When he opened them again, every Zyron was staring at him like he had just done something either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Possibly both. Threxay, however, Threxay had gone completely still. The red was back, stronger than before, spreading across her face, down her neck, even visible along the edges of her hands where her armor didn't fully cover. You repeated it, she said quietly. I clarified, Daniel corrected weakly, in the presence of witnesses. I did not realize there would be witnesses. The commander took another step forward. A second declaration, he said, publicly reinforced. I am not declaring anything. Daniel said. You have now affirmed it twice. Threxay said. I am explaining. There's a difference. In Zyron terms, she replied, there is not. Daniel looked between them. You're kidding. Neither of them answered, which was, unfortunately, an answer. He dragged a hand down his face. So just to confirm, he said, I accidentally said something weird, try to fix it, and now I've made it significantly worse? Yes, Threxay said. Correct, the commander added. Daniel stared at the ceiling. Fantastic. The commander's gaze remained steady on him. Your behavior is highly irregular, he said, yet consistent. That's not comforting. You show no signs of deception, the commander continued. Yet you persist in reinforcing the same statement. Because it's true. Daniel snapped, then immediately froze, because that had come out a little too honest. The room went still again. Daniel slowly lowered his hand from his face. That sounded bad, he admitted. It sounded sincere, the commander said. Phyrexia didn't speak, but she didn't look away either. And the red hadn't faded, not even a little. Daniel exhaled slowly. I am so out of my depth right now. Yes, Phyrexia said quietly. And for some reason, that didn't sound like a threat anymore. There was a very specific kind of silence that followed disaster. Daniel had experienced it exactly once before, when he accidentally shut down a station reactor for 6 whole minutes, and everyone had to stand there pretending they weren't thinking about worst-case scenarios. This silence felt worse, because at least the reactor hadn't been watching him. The entire chamber remained still, every Zyran present focused on him with an intensity that made his skin itch. And in the center of it, Phyrexia, still flushed, still staring at him. You have affirmed it, she said. Her voice wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't commanding. It was steady, controlled, which somehow made it more dangerous. Daniel raised both hands again, like that might somehow rewind time. I clarified, he insisted weakly. You repeated the term, she replied, because it's accurate. The moment the words left his mouth, Daniel closed his eyes. I need to stop talking. Yes, Phyrexia said immediately. A faint ripple passed through the room again, closer to actual amusement this time. The commander stepped forward, clearly far more entertained than he had any right to be. Human Daniel, he said, you're either exceptionally bold or catastrophically unaware. I'm going with the second one, Daniel said. A reasonable assessment, the commander replied. Daniel dropped his hands. Great. Can we resolve this now? Preferably in a way where I don't accidentally enter an alien marriage contract. That depends, the commander said, on whether the declaration is upheld. It's not upheld. Phyrexia spoke before he could continue. It has not been withdrawn. Daniel turned to her. I tried to withdraw it. You withdrew the implication, she said, not the observation. Because the observation is true. He froze. Again, the commander actually let out a quiet breath that sounded suspiciously like a suppressed laugh. You see the difficulty, he said. I see the trap, Daniel muttered. Phyrexia took a step forward. This time, no one reacted. No one reached for a weapon, but the attention in the room sharpened, focused entirely on the two of them. You continue to affirm it, she said. I continue to explain it. In Zyran structure, she said, repetition reinforces intent. And in human structure, Daniel shot back, repetition usually means someone is panicking. She paused. Just for a second. You are panicking? Yes. Despite no immediate threat. Yes. Why? Daniel stared at her. Because I accidentally proposed to an alien warrior in front of her entire crew. A beat. Then several of the Zyrans actually looked away. Not out of disapproval, but because they were very clearly trying not to react. The commander's posture shifted again, his composure slipping just slightly. Your interpretation, he said carefully, is not entirely inaccurate. I knew it, Daniel said. Phyrexia didn't look away. If anything, her focus intensified. You believe this constitutes a proposal, she said. I believe I am dangerously close to something I do not understand and would like to back away slowly. You are not backing away. I am trying. She took another step closer. Now, there was less than a meter between them. Daniel held very, very still. You are not retracting the statement, she said. I told you why. You are not denying it. Daniel hesitated. And that hesitation, that tiny, completely human pause, did not go unnoticed. The red returned, stronger than ever. This time, it wasn't just a flush. It was a full, vivid shift in her skin tone, spreading across her face, her neck, even faintly along her jawline like heat rising to the surface. She started, then stopped. Her voice, when it came again, was quieter. I see. Daniel blinked. That's not a threatening I see, is it? No, that's worse. The commander stepped back slightly, folding his arms. It appears, he said, that the situation is evolving. I would like it to devolve, Daniel replied. That is unlikely. Threxa's gaze hadn't left him. Mistake or not, she said, your actions demonstrate consistency. Daniel frowned. That's a weird way to describe me digging myself into a hole. You had multiple opportunities to deny the statement. I tried. You clarified instead. Because lying felt worse. She tilted her head slightly. You value truth. I value not making things worse, he said. That just didn't work out. Another pause. Then, very subtly, her posture shifted. Not defensive, not aggressive, something else. Reckless, she said again. Yeah, we've established that. And sincere. Daniel exhaled. Debatable. Not from my perspective. That landed differently. Before he could respond, she extended her hand. The movement was deliberate, measured, but not threatening. The entire room seemed to register at once. Daniel stared at her hand. What is this? He asked. A provisional resolution, she said. That sounds official. It is. I'm concerned. You will remain under my watch, she continued, until the implications of your statement are fully assessed. Daniel blinked. That sounds like I'm being assigned to you. You are. That sounds like I made things worse again. You did. He looked at her hand, then at her face. Still red, still completely serious. Is there an option where I'm not assigned to the warrior I accidentally proposed to? No. Okay. He reached out and took her hand. Her grip was firm, warm, steady, and very noticeably. She didn't let go immediately. Daniel, he said, because that felt like the right thing to do. Threxe, she replied. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she released his hand. But the faint color in her skin didn't fade. Not even a little. The commander stepped forward again. It is settled, then, he said. The human remains under Threxa's supervision. Daniel nodded slowly. Right. Supervision. A beat. Out of curiosity, he added, how long does assessment of implications usually take? The commander considered that. That depends on the individuals involved. Daniel looked at Threxe. She was still watching him, still focused, still, very clearly, affected. Right, he said. Of course it does. He sighed. Because somewhere between panic, poor word choice, and an unfortunate commitment to honesty, he had managed to complicate his life on an interstellar level. And the worst part? As he glanced at her one more time,